Welcome to Ricardo's Time, to another episode. And today we have a very special guest. He's a friend of mine. I was lately in the last months in his place, in London, and I really had a good time. His name is, guess who? Razi, of course. Razi, thank you for being here.
Hey, Ricardo, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Razi is a founder and director of the Ayn Rand Center UK. I would like to that you tell the audience, when did you hear about Ayn Rand the first time? So we get to know you a little more and your story.
So I was a teenager in Israel, a left-wing teenager. Left-wing in Israel means something a little bit different than what it means elsewhere, because at least back then, economic issues were not talked about. It was mostly a Middle East conflict kind of divide, and I was on the left of that. I was thinking Israel is kind of, if not the bad guy, then at least should be making gestures towards its enemies in hope of making peace. As I saw the things that were going on, I kind of drifted away from that, and I moved, towards the right, and I was not super impressed with what I found there either. And at some point, I came across libertarianism, which made more sense to me at the time. And I kept seeing Rand's name pop up everywhere. There were quotes of hers that I really liked. But I didn't look into her that much. And all I heard was that she wrote these two massive novels. And I was not much of a fiction reader. I like reading, but it was nonfiction. And it was 2 years later when I was at a bookshop in Amsterdam, and I saw a copy of all books, Return of the Primitive, the collection of essays, and it was Rand, it was nonfiction, it was time, for me to read her. Oddly enough, that's also the same book that Nikos read. So maybe that's an approach to promoting objectivism that I haven't thought about yet. Just distribute that.
So it was the Return to the Primitive. The first one.
Yeah, that was the first one I read. I was pretty much sold from the get-go, although I didn't really understand what I was sold on. It took a while, but I think it took less than 2 years for me to read everything she wrote, including the fiction, and I was and reread some of it, and I was immediately on board.
Yeah. So how old were you at that time? Because you were saying there was a process where you were a left winger, then you get to the right, you didn't find out much there. And then you said, okay, libertarianism, maybe it's an option. Like how old were you? Because
I think I got to libertarianism within months. I first read Rand 2 years later, so I was 19 when I first read her. And I quickly, I saw the issues, the problems with libertarianism pretty early on. It kind of helped read Rand. And of course, Peter Schwartz has an essay in Return of the Primitive titled Libertarianism, the Perversion of Liberty, which I highly recommend to people who haven't read it. At first reading, I was upset because I still considered myself a libertarian, but it was, he won that argument.
Yeah, I understand that. You say you read the Return to the Primitive, and I wonder, what was one thing that really impressed you there? Because we all have these stories. In my case, I really got impressed with the virtue of selfishness, but it's not necessarily that you get impressed in the first time you read, but in your case, you said you did. What was something that really surprised you, or you didn't see it that way before?
So if you ask like a specific essay or a specific thing she says, I don't remember to that level of detail, but I do remember that I immediately got this sort of clarity, and some of it were things that I that were not far off from what I was already thinking, and not just about politics, but I didn't have them clarified in my mind. I had some general feelings that her writings kind of helped concretize, helped make into actual thoughts, generally speaking, I think it was the clarity that was unique, breath of fresh air.
All right. So now it's been maybe more than almost 20 years since
More
you
than
find
20.
out about Ayn Rand?
Yeah, more than 20. Just over 20.
Wow. And till now, since you already have also more experience, more mature, how do you, to the audience, who are probably younger, even though we are still young, of course, how do you?
That's what I tell myself.
Yeah. How do you try, or how do you apply these principles to your life? Could you give me some concretes here?
Yeah. So I think I had, many people who get into objectivism tend to be kind of rationalistic. They like the ideas. They don't really think well enough about how to apply them. And it's it's a process. And when you read Rand and you get enthusiastic about her, you don't want to think about a process that takes many years. You're like, I'm there now, and I think I was there as well. And so it took a while. So one thing that I would say for me was kind of more or less a floating abstraction was, work-wise, productiveness was, I was a translator up until I started ARC UK, or up until I was able to pay myself a salary from ARC UK. And that was, that was nice. It was good work. It paid well enough, but it was never something that I would jump out of bed in the morning, super enthusiastic about, try to go to sleep, but kept thinking about new ideas about how I could become a better translator. That was not a thing. And I read about, productive activity, and like, having a central purpose. And it wasn't that way for me until I started ARC UK, or until I had the idea to start to start this company. So that was, that's one area which was a struggle, and it took many years to get to. Finding a central purpose is hard. Like, it's not automatic. You read Rand and then you're like, okay, everything falls into place. That's not how it goes. And I think for many people, it's a very, very big struggle. And and it depends how you take it. But in some senses, people might feel like they're doing something wrong. They're like a bad objectivist if you haven't found your central purpose. No, I mean, it's a process, and life is a process, and this is a major part of that process. And for me, luckily it was once I got there, I'm really happy where I finally ended up, but it's not easy.
Yeah, that's true. And it's interesting because there are some people that already know since they are childs, or, they want to be soccer players, so they like music, and it's kind of obvious for them. But there are other people who really much more time. So also, I want to read something from Lisa Van Damme. So it says, a few years into teaching, I had something of a career crisis, and I considered getting out of education altogether. With the benefit of hindsight and age, I know what was happening, but at the time I only knew that I was unhappy. I sought guidance from people I respected. Here's the worst advice I got. Figure out some realm where you want to make an impact, where you want to change the world. But this is the advice I got from Leonard. reflect on your day, your week, what made you the most happy, what did you most enjoy. Try to extract principles from those experiences about what activities bring you the most satisfaction. Then try and pursue a career that features those. So this is advice from Leonard Pico to Lisa Van Damme. And there we can see that when I read this, I thought, yeah, many people want to change the world or do something related to that, to be heroes. But I don't think you need to change the world in order to become a hero, right? Because there are people who, for instance, they love making coffee all day and they can do that and become their best doing that. And they don't necessarily, become like a big intellectual or an astronaut.
Yeah, I love that quote. Where is it from?
It's from her Facebook post I read. What do you think about this? Yeah.
I mean, it's great. It's yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, if there's like world championships in making coffee. It could be
Exactly.
That could be what you love. I mean, I know I don't know them closely, but I know somebody who's a cleaner, but they have made this business. So like, I'm going to be the best cleaner. And yeah, you can another example is Robert Nasser has a show on the Ayn Rand Center UK's YouTube channel. The reason I asked Robert to do a show was because we were once on Clubhouse and somebody was asking for career advice, and he said, "Oh, I'm the worst person to ask because I used to be in fast food for 15 years and I loved it." And I'm like, that exactly is what makes you the best person to ask, because yeah, if you're doing the kind of work that you think will get you, I don't know, the most Instagram followers, or most people saying I wish I was him, I don't know, cheering you in a stadium. That's not a reason. That's not a reason to become a football player either. Get cheered in a stadium. So yeah, it sounds cliche to say do what you love most, but of course, yeah, that is the way you find a central purpose that you actually stick with. So great advice.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the only way really to get to your full potential, because you will really do your best if you focus your mind. And that's the only way. And talking about that, what you do now compared to your last job, what do you think you love the most about what you're doing now, for instance?
So, the Ayn Rand Center UK started, or before it started, we were doing a weekly meetup in London. Once a week we would meet. You've been to this meetup. You were here last month, right? So we're still doing that every week.
Yeah,
and yeah, I that's what made me think, maybe I can make, if there's any way to make a career out of this, I will find it, and I will do that, because I got to interact with people who are fans of Rand's work, and people who are brand new to her work, and anything in between on a weekly basis. And what we do at the meetup is we have in-depth discussions of her essays, one essay at a time, and sometimes it's a lecture by Pico, but it's always in-depth discussions. And then we have a few hours of a social, so it's a combination of deep intellectual stuff and the social part. And yeah, that was what I was enjoying so much. And I really always especially loved it when somebody came in, was completely new, had never read Rand, happened to find us on meetup.com, and then decided to join. And in many, well, quite a few cases, let's say, people became objectivists because they found us by accident in some cases. So I love that, and I love the fact that we now have a YouTube channel where it's very different. In-person interactions are different from online. But the advantage of online is we get to reach a much wider audience. And so, yeah, these interactions, doing something that you value that others also value is
it's amazing. I totally agree. And I also think networking is a big part, as well as you said, meeting people and people who maybe have also already live objectively, in a sense, without knowing Ayn Rand, Miss Rand. But also there are all cases, right? And I also think that's part of this, what makes it really special to this philosophy, that is, it's not only about abstracts, but also meeting real people who apply this to their life and live it by it, right? Not only say they are objectivists or, So I would like to ask you also, since I do something similar to you, there's always the question that what's the best way to communicate objectivism? And I think I would change the word best for the one effective way to communicate objectivism. In your experience, what it's an effective way to communicate objectivism? Because I see that your program, for instance, it's a lot based not only in politics, but also you are doing also a lot of essays now, right? So what do you think, and why is that incorporation in your content?
I think so. First of all, when I find the magic formula to communicate objectivism, we will all be out of work because everybody will become an objectivist. But until then, I'm very much enjoying the process of trying to figure it out. So I don't know. I mean, when it comes to in-person events, there are certain things that are more attractive to people, and different things resonate with different people and will most likely or more likely get their attention. With what we do online, I very much try to do as little politics as possible, because I don't know if you can really, if that's where you want to communicate these ideas. I think people who go into a political discussion are going in for a fight. They're not looking to learn, they're looking to win. And yeah, I would much rather challenge people on their ethics and their epistemology. That being said, you are still challenging people. You are still essentially telling them that they're wrong. And this is what Rand kind of told all of us when we first came across her. We had certain ideas that were not compatible with hers, and many of us were convinced by her. Many more were not. Most people who read Rand are not objectivists. So, and I think without a doubt, if you look at individuals communicating objectivism, I think there are, Ayn Rand is obviously in a league of her own in terms of that. And so
yeah.
if still you have so many people reading her works and not, not becoming objectivists, I don't know, it's a tough one. So
yeah, I also meant not only political but also current events maybe would be more accurate.
Yeah,
what you do. Yeah, I mean, as for the audience who don't know much about me, I also try storytelling, but of course, always the best source is the original, which is Ayn Rand. And it's true that you need sometimes help because she's so deep, and even though her language, when she communicates philosophy and objectivism, it's simpler than other philosophers, still you need a lot of study with someone who knows more than you. Storytelling, I use it to direct them to Ayn Rand more than give.
Yeah, I think
Ayn Rand content.
Certainly, what we do at the Ayn Rand Center UK is try to get people to read Rand. So, for example, when we do the meetups that I was discussing, like the in-person events, that is directly like you show up at a meetup, you're expected to have read at least the essay that's going to be discussed. which is pretty straightforward. So it's much smaller numbers than we ever get online, but you don't have to read anything to watch an episode of the Daily Objective. But we hope, if you've never read Rand and you happen to come across the Daily Objective, and sometimes we get such people, you know, especially if we talk about somebody who's in the news. I don't know, we do an episode on Tucker Carlson, it gets 4 times as many views as every other episode. I don't know how many of those people come back for the next one, let alone read Rand. But yeah, that's, you know, it's yeah, it's an attempt on our part. Yeah. And it is an attempt on our part. Like I would think it doesn't have to be everybody. We only need the best ones. And even then, you know, among the people who will read Rand, some will not become objectivists, some will hopefully go on to become intellectuals, which I think is it's very important. Most objectivists realize the importance of intellectuals, but yeah, you can't promote the ideas without having really the people who have studied not just the philosophy, but studied how to teach it. And have, whenever I speak to objectivist intellectuals about something that I'm, you know, struggling to understand or you know, thinking about, but not happy with the way I'm thinking about it, it's, you know, it's really impressive how clear their thinking is. So yeah, I would encourage people to read Rand, and then to hopefully at some point go and study from the intellectuals.
That's a good one. All right, I have one more question, and it's, since I quote Leonard Pico in a sense, I know you are one of the few peoples, and you know, from the new generation, I would say you're still very young, that who met with Leonard Pico, and I wanted to know, how was that feeling? Since, what did you feel at that time, at that moment, since it's like meeting a hero, right? Like Ayn Rand's hair. What do you remember from that moment?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned that I read Rand for the first time over 20 years ago, and I read Peikoff around the same time, you know, so I've been an admirer my, you know, whole adult life. And I met him for the first time 3 months ago. So that was definitely one of the greatest moments of my life. Yeah, he is an amazing human being. We know that, you can know that without reading him, just from consuming his work. But meeting him in person, I mean, because it was a, you know, private meeting, I'm not going to disclose anything he said, but I do want to like say, you know, he's 89 years old. He's retired from philosophy for quite a few years now, and he was and people who know him told me, you know, he is retired from philosophy. Don't come in with like a list of philosophical questions. It's not like you know, a one-on-one version of the Leonard Peikoff podcast.
Right.
But he was so sharp, and he was so like you know, he still got it, you know. So I think if I did come in with a list of philosophical questions, maybe he would have walked out. But if he decided that he wants to answer them, it would have been yeah, Peikoff, pretty much. Yeah, Peikoff at his prime. So I kind of regretted not, you know, listening to all his courses in the few weeks before, like re-listening to everything in the yeah. But yeah, it was amazing. I certainly hope I'm gonna get to meet him again, and
yeah, I'm sure you will. All right, so if we can wrap up here, I would say you can find more about Razi, of course, from the Ayn Rand Center UK. He has a YouTube channel, and he does a lot of events weekly, right? But he has a daily objective, which is daily, as the name already says. I mean, you are one of the few people actually that does this on a daily basis, because I think it's hard.
We're the only ones. We're the only ones, other than Yaron Brook, who's on pretty much every day and sometimes twice a day. I don't know that there's another organization that does a daily show informed by objectivism. And by the way, I might as well, we're 1 week away from our 3-year anniversary. Next Monday is exactly 3 years from the first ever episode of the Daily Objective. So
wow,
a few days in those 3 years, but very few. So we are on pretty much every day, every weekday, 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. East Coast in the US. And yeah, we're going to have a big celebration episode next week.
excellent. I will be there for sure, and congratulations for that as well.
Thanks.
Thank you so much to the audience for being here. All right, thank you so much to everyone. Have a nice day. Bye.
Bye.